I'll now declare this 41st meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts to order. My apologies for the couple minutes delay. Some of us were at the National Prayer Breakfast, and it took a little while to get over here. The word was there, but it was a tad late. Colleagues, the procedure is fairly straightforward this morning. We are hearing witnesses on Chapter 2. We will have opening remarks from the deputies that are present, and then we will go in rotation in the usual prescribed fashion until our allotted time is exhausted. If there are no questions, concerns about the procedure, then indeed we will begin. And good morning to all our guests. Pleasure to have you back here at Public Accounts, and I know you're all thrilled to be here too.
Mr. Chair, just apologies for interrupting you, but may I propose that, given that the witnesses were kind enough to give us their written comments, that we simply have those written comments and that we may pass to questions immediately in order to have enough time. We do recognize that there are eight people here today, and we have very limited time to ask our questions.
All right, well, let's try and do this quickly. Let me just test the room then. Colleagues, there's been a suggestion that we deem the opening remarks to have been received because they are in writing, although I understand one deputy did not bring a written copy. I don't know why, but they didn't. But notwithstanding that, I'm in the hands of the committee. Is there agreement?
I think it's normal practice that we allow our witnesses at least the opportunity to have opening remarks. So I would recommend that we continue the normal way, and that is to allow our witnesses to have their opening remarks.
Right. I'm not seeing unanimity, so you have the right to place a motion, but I think you know where that's going to go given what we've heard. So I would suggest we'll continue in the usual fashion. Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There may be unanimity if we were to allow or ask for just 1 minute of opening remarks with the statements as presented as tabled.
Well, let me test the House on that. Test the floor. Are those in favor of limiting it to 1 minute on opening remarks?
Mr. Chair, I think the difficulty with that is that the witnesses have prepared opening remarks. So to ask them to then change that would mean it's not really fair to our witnesses to have to ad lib go off of their written opening remarks. So I don't think it's fair to the witnesses to do that.
Okay. Again, same as before. There's no unanimity, but further comments on this. Let's not get too bogged down here, folks. Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Allen.
Suggesting that I understand the government would like the opening remarks. All I would suggest and ask the government to do, since we need to talk to these witnesses in a fulsome way as possible. We have Thursday open. I would suggest to the government, if we don't get through all of our questions in the sense of a fullness of talking to all 8 witnesses, we actually do that on a Thursday. I would ask the government not to think about that, not necessarily decide upon it at this moment. Let's see what we get. I'm happy to get underway.
All right. Do you have the need to take the floor still? No, thank you. Okay, I'm not hearing unanimity on that. I don't have a motion in front of me, so unless I hear differently from colleagues, I am going to pick up where I left off and proceed in inviting our guests to both introduce themselves and to read their opening remarks, and upon conclusion, then we'll begin our rotation. Again, if there are no further interventions, then I guess we would probably start with Deputy Minister of Defense would make the most sense, but I leave it in your hands, folks. Please introduce yourself, your delegation, and present your opening remarks.
Speak quickly. I have Lieutenant General Andre Deschamps, the Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Chief Financial Officer Kevin Lindsay, and ADM Materiel Dan Ross with me. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity this morning. I'll share my time briefly with the Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Acquiring major military capabilities is complex, takes many years. In his report, the Auditor General underscores the innovative and unique nature of the Joint Strike Fighter program and notes there is no single set of federal policies or rules that govern participation in an international initiative such as the JSF program. We agree with the Auditor General on this point. We are confident that the government's 7-point plan sets out a strong footing to move forward on the AG's concerns. The government has been involved with the Joint Strike Fighter program since 1997. With the advantage of hindsight and with the AG's observations in mind, there are clearly things we would have managed differently in the program and things that all of us could have done better. On the matter of costing, there are 3 key components: acquisition.
I would just ask you to slow down somewhat. I think the interpreters are having trouble following you at that speed.
Interpreters in agreement with that, so if we could just a bit, not much.
I'm trying to balance between speed and...
I understand, and we appreciate those efforts.
Would the member like me to dial this back at all? Like, do you want me to go back somewhere? No? Fine.
No.
On the matter of costing, Mr. Chairman, there are three key components: acquisition, sustainment, and operating. For the F-35, the acquisition envelope has been set at $9 billion. Sustainment and operating costs are estimated at $5.7 billion and $10 billion, respectively, for 20 years, beginning when the aircraft would be acquired later in this decade. I would note that the approach we took for costing the F-35 is exactly the same approach and the same 20-year time frame that has been taken with all our air asset procurements going back at least to 2004. For the maritime helicopter project, the Chinooks, the Hercules J models, and the new C-17 Globemasters. In each case, announcements and communications focused only on the costs of acquisition and sustainment. Never did we talk about operating costs, Mr. Chairman. On operating costs, the Vice Chief of the Defense Staff oversees a rigorous business planning process every year to ensure that the departmental costs of operating all of our fleets are affordable within our base budget.
The operating costs for the Next Generation Fighter program would be included in the department's base operating budget, as are the operating costs of all other fleets, and would be debated in Parliament annually as part of the estimates process.
We have assumed that the operating costs of the F-35 will be similar to those being incurred in our base budget for operating the CF-18 fleet.
Our approach to costing has never been characterized as full life cycle. Our approach has been consistent and compliant with TB policy and guidance.
In posting a comparison of the department's estimates and the parliamentary budget officer's estimates on our website, we use the same average price per aircraft as all 9 partners are using and have received from the Joint Project Office. And on a good faith basis, we presented our estimates on the understanding that the parliamentary budget officer did not include operating costs in his calculations. As stated in the chapter, Mr. Chairman, we accept the Auditor General's recommendation on life cycle costs, and within the context of the 7-point plan set out by the government, we will report annually on cost estimates through the new National Fighter Secretariat. I will now turn my remaining time over to the Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, Lieutenant General Andre Deschamps.
Thank you, Deputy. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, bonjour. Thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this important discussion on replacing Canada's fighter jets.
As mentioned in the Canada First Defence Strategy, the Canadian Forces need to replace our aging CF-18 fleet with new fighter aircraft to help our military personnel defend our sovereignty, to remain a credible partner in the defence of North America, and to give Canada efficient and modern air capacity for international operations.
That strategy in 2008, we analyzed the current and future operating environments and associated threats. We assessed current and emerging technologies and derived capability gaps that would be a reality in the 2020 era and for the follow-on 30 years. What became clear to us is that many nations are actively engaged in developing and fielding advanced technologies that will seriously challenge current fighter capabilities. We also expect to see these advanced technologies proliferate in ways that will be difficult to anticipate and control. This is what formed the basis of our operational requirement for the next generation fighter aircraft, requirements focused on mission success and aircrew safety. This analysis led to a statement of operational requirements, including mandatory capabilities that clearly pointed towards a 5th generation fighter. The bottom line is that tomorrow's operating environment requires stealth, the ability to sense and process vast quantities of information in a very short time, and to be able to operate with others, starting with our closest allies anywhere around the globe. Based on our analysis and my responsibilities as the commander of the RCAF, I recommended the only aircraft available that could effectively deliver operational success and optimize the safety of our crews.
While the next generation fighter procurement process continues, I am going to provide the National Fighter Aircraft Procurement Secretariat with the information it requires to assume its coordination and oversight responsibilities. With my staff, I am confident of the successful transition to the next generation fighter aircraft, while discharging my accountability to deliver the operational capacity that our country requires.
Thank you.
Bonjour, je me présente.
Microphone, please. I'd like to introduce Mr. Tom Ring, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Acquisitions in my department.
Here today to explain the role of my department in the replacement of Canada's fighter jets. With respect to military procurement, my department is responsible for the acquisition of defense supplies for the Department of National Defense in support of their responsibilities. Our colleagues in the Department of National Defense are the program and technical authority, and as such have responsibilities that include, for example, the definition of operational requirements, the preparation of technical evaluations, and responsibility for associated budgets. La loi sur la production de défense confère.
With regards to PWGSC, the Defense Production Act provides the Minister of Public Works and Government Services with the exclusive authority to buy or otherwise acquire defense supplies required by the Department of National Defense. As such, the Minister is the contracting or acquiring authority for these types of acquisitions.
Responsibilities of the technical authority, as outlined by the Auditor General, are appended to my speaking points today. Now, I would like to address the issue of due diligence more specific to my department's role in the replacement of Canada's fighter jets. À cet égard, nous avons pris part à des discussions avec le...
In that respect, we engage in discussions with DND, the technical authority, to understand the high-level mandatory capabilities. We consulted on the high-level mandatory capabilities with the technical experts at the Department of National Defense to determine if a competitive process could be conducted. These mandatory capabilities shaped the resulting procurement strategy. If more than one product can meet the mandatory requirements, then a competitive process should be held.
Analysis. Moreover, we met with another potential aircraft manufacturer to discuss their ability to meet the mandatory capabilities set forth by the technical authority. We determined that the procurement strategy was in accordance with Treasury Board contracting policy and that this acquisition met the requirement of Section 6D of the Government Contracts Regulations for a sole source acquisition. We requested a written confirmation from DND, the technical authority, in accordance with our department's supply manual, that the F-35 is the only aircraft available to Canada that has fifth-generation capabilities and meets the high-level mandatory capabilities of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Mr. Chair, it is on that basis that Public Works and Government Services feels that it exercised due diligence commensurate with the current stage of the project. In fact, in his appearance here last week, the Auditor General noted that we did exercise some due diligence. However, he deemed it insufficient. Bien qu'aucune des recommandations...
While no recommendation was directed at Public Works, we use every opportunity to continually improve our due diligence actions for complex and unique procurements.
On April 3rd clearly frames how due diligence will be applied as we move forward with replacing Canada's fighter jets. This 7-action point identifies the respective roles of key departments, including my department. A secretariat will be led by Public Works and will ensure the delivery of the government's 7-point action plan. Terms of reference governing the committee structure are being drafted, and we are also active in staffing and defining priority tasks for action. Voici les principaux objectifs du secrétariat. Tout d'abord,
the Secretariat will focus on the following outcomes. First, governance and coordination through collaborative arrangements with the key departments involved. Second, strengthen due diligence through increased oversight and third-party involvement. Finally, openness and transparency through clear articulation of timelines, expectations, and timely communications.
Which will be a key component of a new governance structure recently met and began its work in support of the action plan. Public Works and Government Services Canada is committed to playing a lead role both in terms of coordination and in overseeing the process in a manner that meets the expectation of Parliament and citizens. Merci. I'll be happy to reply to your questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll be very brief in my remarks.
Yep, thank you. Go ahead.
Bonjour, mon nom est Simon Kennedy.
Good morning. My name is Simon Kennedy, and I am the Senior Associate Deputy Minister at Industry Canada. Thank you for inviting me to speak here today.
Mandate is to help make Canadian industry more productive and competitive in the global economy. This includes leveraging major investments in military equipment to encourage long-term industrial development and significant economic activity in Canada. The F-35, or Joint Strike Fighter program, is unique, as is its approach to industrial participation. All JSF partner countries agreed to forego offset programs like our industrial and regional benefits policy, which would normally be applied to military procurement. Instead, work on the JSF program is awarded on a best value basis, meaning that companies are given the opportunity to compete for F-35 work. While we forego the guaranteed minimum amount of economic activity that would come with an IRB approach, the industrial participation model being pursued through the F-35 consortium offers other important benefits for Canadian companies. First, these companies have the opportunity to be involved in the early development of a very advanced fighter aircraft, allowing them to develop cutting-edge technologies that can be applied elsewhere in their businesses. Second, these companies can bid on contracts involving the production of a global fleet of over 3,000 partner aircraft, not just those planes that are directly associated with Canada's purchase. And finally, Canadian firms that are involved in the production of the JSF are well positioned to maintain and repair the equipment that they make over the decades to come. Because of the unique nature of this program, Industry Canada has been actively engaged in educating Canadian companies about the program and in helping them position themselves to succeed. We've been doing so for more than a decade, through the development and production phases of the program and increasingly the sustainment phase. Canadian companies have done well. Since Canada joined the Joint Strike Fighter program in 1997, 70 Canadian companies have received $435 million in contracts. Participation in the JSF program provides the opportunity to compete for billions more over the program's lifetime. Canadian companies are well positioned to succeed. Canada has the 5th largest aerospace sector in the world and the 3rd largest within the JSF partnership. The globally competitive nature of our industry is a strong base from which to pursue opportunities going forward. Ça me fera plaisir de répondre à vos questions au sujet du rôle d'Industrie.
I would be pleased to answer any questions you might have regarding Industry Canada's role in this program. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. I am Michelle Doré, Secretary of the Treasury Board of Canada. The Treasury Board and its Secretariat set policies to guide departments in a wide range of management and resourcing activities, including the acquisition of assets. The Treasury Board is also the Committee of Cabinet which provides ministers with expenditure and contracting authority when an acquisition process reaches that stage. The F-35 has not already met that stage.
Elements to be considered in estimating costs are predicated on the purpose for the costing and the decisions for which the information will be used. For example, if an entirely new program is being considered, relevant or appropriate costs would include personnel and benefits, accommodation, grant or contribution funds, if that is indeed the nature of the program, administration or overhead, which includes a range of activities such as communications, legal services, financial and human resources services, etc., and any asset or material required to deliver the program. For the acquisition of an asset, relevant or appropriate life cycle costs would include the purchase price of the asset and other one-time costs directly related to its acquisition, such as the project office to manage the process. They would also include the delivery and setup required and any consequential costs related to maintenance, replacement, refit, and repair to keep the asset operational throughout its useful life. Where relevant to the acquisition itself, and only in those situations, personnel and training costs would also be factored. In instances where such costs are not incremental and are covered by an existing program for which the acquisition is made, they can be provided for information but are not directly related to the acquisition. But as our policies also indicate, costs are one factor among many that are considered in any major decision. The ultimate goal is to achieve an optimal balance of overall benefits to the Crown and the Canadian people in relation to the objectives sought and results to be achieved.
In the particular context of the audit on replacing Canada's fighter jets, as the Auditor General has indicated in his report and in testimony before this committee, the nature of the multi-country development program, the assessment of the requirements for Canada's defence and security, the setting of a budget for the replacement of a fighter jet capability, and the opportunities provided for Canadian companies are all unique elements that do not easily lend themselves to the normal sequencing of an acquisition process or the usual application of our set of policies and practices. In recognizing this and in accepting the Auditor General's recommendation, the government has given us a clear direction on the way forward.
Government on April 3, 2012, TBS will commission an independent review of DND's acquisition and sustainment project assumptions and potential costs for the F-35, which will be made public. And prior to project approval, TBS will also review the acquisition and sustainment costs and ensure full compliance with Treasury Board policies. I would be pleased to answer any questions. Il me fera plaisir de répondre à vos questions. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I'd be pleased to answer any of your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
No? Okay. Before we go in rotation, a couple points. One, just a welcome to Mr. Alexander and Mr. Hahn, who are both returning from the previous meeting and have interest and involvement in this file, and we welcome them back. And I remind colleagues that non-members are eligible to speak, providing their caucus colleagues are prepared to give their time to them. So I would hope that there'll be no problems moving in and out of that process. And if I could, deputies will know that when they come to public accounts for a hearing, there is an expectation that they would provide a departmental action plan. Now, Mr. Fonberg, you made reference to a 7-point plan, but I don't actually see a plan tabled. Is there a particular reason why, sir?
No, Mr. Chairman, we're working on the precise approach. We did agree with the Auditor General's recommendations on life cycle costing. We are working with the Treasury Board and the Comptroller General on the precise methodology, which is work carried over from last year, and thought we would be better to complete that work before we tabled the plan.
Not necessarily so. The reason that this rule was implemented, I was here when this rule was brought in, it was to prevent exactly what you're saying, because by the time we get the action plan, we're pretty disjointed from the focus of the discussion. I can appreciate that it may not be complete, but I would suggest in the future, sir, and to other deputies, that at least bring what you've done, almost like a teacher with homework. If you're not done, at least bring in something to show me you've made some effort, but don't show up with nothing. So in the future, please, all deputies, that is a request, a respectful request and requirement from this committee when you come before a hearing. So I'd ask you to honor that, sir.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. Hearing no interventions, then we'll begin in the rotation, and we will start with Mr. Saxton. You have the floor now, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses for being here this morning. My first questions will be for national defense. The debate following the Auditor General's spring report has been primarily focused on the difference in accounting between the Department of National Defense and the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Can you tell the committee how the Department of National Defense and the Parliamentary Budget Officer arrived at two different cost projections?
I can, Mr. Chairman. I will start by telling you that the Department's work is based on a bottom-up approach that works through all of the information that's developed by the Joint Project Office and the Joint Estimating Team in Washington. Very, very detailed work. My colleague can speak to that issue. Our understanding of the Parliamentary Budget Officer's methodology, and I would say the Parliamentary Budget Officer was handled a very difficult task, asking to do an independent assessment of the costs, which we took to mean independent of the work of the Joint Project Office and independent of our own work. But he did the best he could. He took a top-down approach. He used what is called parametric analysis, generally deemed to be not appropriate or suitable for a project in this state of development. And I could ask the Chief Financial Officer to elaborate a little bit on those methodologies if you would like.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Deputy. Mr. Chair, as the deputies pointed out, the PBO used this parametric modeling, which is normally reserved for projects in the conceptual stage of development, where there's very little cost data available to do a bottom-up analysis. In doing so, the PBO estimated the acquisition price of the aircraft at $148.5 million each, and all of his subsequent costs derived from that. Because that acquisition price is significantly inflated above what we understand the cost to be from the Joint Project Office at the time, all of the subsequent data and costs estimated by the PBO are similarly inflated by significant amounts. If the PBO had used what we understood the acquisition price of the aircraft to be at the time, that is based on SAR 2009, $75 million, then the PBO's estimate, other things being equal, would have been about $17.2 billion over his 30-year time frame, rather than the 29. And that difference is entirely attributable to the PBO's assumption about the acquisition cost of the aircraft.
Thank you. This government, in accordance with the recommendations of the Auditor General in his spring report, is implementing a new secretariat similar to the National Shipbuilding Procurement Strategy. In your opinion, how will establishing this new secretariat bring more transparency and openness to the process of replacing the CF-18 fighter jets?
I would start by saying, Mr. Chairman, that the Secretariat will address many of the concerns and the gaps that the Auditor General actually identified in his report. I would turn to my colleague from Public Works, who will chair that committee, to spend a minute talking about some of the details and work plans of that Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Fomberg. Mr. Chair, there's really two ingredients. First is a structural set of elements, which very much mimics the approach we took for the National Shipbuilding Strategy. And there's three levels of, if you wish, coordination, oversight, and consensus decision-making. The first level is a top-tier Deputy Minister Coordinating Committee that I will chair. Colleagues here today will be with me on that committee. We also have ex officio member, which is not unusual, Treasury Board, Finance. And this top tier will be supported by an ADM committee, similar to what we did, Assistant Deputy Minister Committee, similarly as we did for National Shipbuilding. Mr. Tom Ring will chair that committee. These are colleagues, again, that will be doing the tasking and pushing forward the agenda. The actual working level tier, if you wish, is called the Secretariat. And this is people that will be co-located from various departments, essentially carrying out the work. Now, one point I would make about oversight and transparency, there is one variable which is new for the Secretariat, and that is the inclusion of two external members on the DM Coordinating Committee. We are in the process of selecting these individuals. This was not the case for the National Shipbuilding Strategy. I want to be clear, however, we are going to use third party throughout the work of that tiered structure. So third party were used for National Shipbuilding. We will continue doing that, but the difference I'm making is that there will be two independent members on the DM's Coordinating Committee as well. Now, that is a structure which will now be superimposed, if you wish, to the actual seven-point action plan. So we are right now working at developing the terms of reference, which essentially will be the modus operandi of the committee structure. And from there, we will move on to tasking and defining priority elements against the seven-point action plan. At the macro level, this is where we are right now.
Time has expired. Over now to Mr. Allen. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. To Mr. Fonnenberg. Mr. Fonnenberg, how long have you been Deputy Minister of the Department of National Defense?
I think about 4 years and 7 months, Mr. Chairman.
So sometime in 2008 you would have been appointed, give or take a month or two.
Actually, 2007, I believe.
Thank you. So you would have been around in 2010 at the Auditor General's Fall Report, Chapter 6 on the Chinooks and the maritime helicopters, is that correct?
I would have been the Deputy Minister at the time, yes, sir.
So did you read the report of the Auditor General, Chapter 6 in 2010 Fall Report?
I did indeed.
did you make note of the recommendation that says that we should have full life cycle costs involved when we actually bring estimates to government?
Mr. Chairman, we actually tabled a fairly detailed management action plan, not this time, but that time, in response to that particular recommendation, and are prepared to talk to the progress we've made in actually undertaking the response to that recommendation.
Well, rather than talk to the progress, sir, why indeed didn't it happen with the F-35s if you acknowledge the fact that you didn't do full life cycle costing for the maritime helicopters and the Chinooks, agreed with the AG that you would do it in future projects, and yet you've now come back to me, and let me quote to you, sir, from what you said this morning. I would note that the approach we took for costing the F-35 is exactly the same approach, and the same 20-year time frame that has taken with all of our air assets procurement going back to at least 2004 for the maritime helicopter project, the Chinooks, the Hercules J models, the new C-17 Globemasters. In each case, announcements and communications focused only on the cost of acquisition and sustainment, never on operating costs. Sir, in light of your statement today, and in light of the review that you actually in 2010 accepted the Auditor General's report, and I'm not going to go back and quote the report from the book that I have in front of me from 2010, why didn't you do what you said you would do in 2010 with this project?
Mr. Chairman, just to get the timing and the sequencing right, the costing and the decision documents for Cabinet were completed in the spring of 2010. The Auditor General's report was in the fall of 2010. Our management action plan, which spoke to that recommendation, spoke to timing that would have seen that work completed, I believe, later in 2011. We can update on the timing, but the fact of the matter is the costing we did was 7 or 8 months before the Auditor General's report in 2010.
Actually, sir, I beg to differ. The costing you did goes back to the 2008-2009 budget when you said the costing was $25 billion. So clearly in 2008-2009 you knew it was 25. In 2010 you came up with a new costing. So how did 25 get to 15, sir, in light of the fact that you had asked for 25 as a costing estimate at full life cycle cost, and kudos for doing it right in 2008-2009. So how did you get it so wrong after the fact when you dropped it to 15 from 25?
Mr. Chairman, we actually tried to clarify with the Auditor General his comments about $25 billion in 2008-2009. We never had such an estimate. So you'd have to speak to him about where that estimate actually came from.
Actually, sir, if I interrupted, and I hate to do this to you, know that, but time is sensitive here. He takes the number from the budget that your minister put forward to Cabinet to ask Parliament to authorize $25 billion is where it came from. Are you saying, sir, that you as a Deputy Minister did not require the $25 billion and did not ask for it?
No, what I'm saying is that there was no $25 billion in the decision document in 2008, Mr. Chairman, as far as we can tell. You'd have to ask the Auditor General where that number actually came from. We spoke to his office, told him we would be clarifying that issue. In terms of, if you would like me to go on the $25 to $15 billion, if there's time, I don't know.
So it's up to you, Mr. Allen. You want him to conclude, or do you want to move on?
No, so what you're telling me, just so I'm clear, is the department never costed the life cycle cost of the F-35 in 2008-2009, and that the department did not ask in that budget for $25 billion, and that the Auditor General is wrong when he makes that statement in that paragraph?
To the absolute best of my knowledge, that's actually correct, Mr. Chairman.
So the correct part is that the Auditor General is wrong.
His statement, not in his report itself, but my understanding from his testimony last week was that he got it wrong on the 2008 issue and the $25 billion.
And I guess we have to ask the Auditor General how he got his numbers wrong. So notwithstanding that, so are you saying, sir, that your number has always been $15 billion, that you never had a number of $25 billion?
No, and I think actually that issue has been clarified, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, in 2008, when the Government of Canada approved the Canada First Defence Strategy, we included at that time, publicly I believe, a $9 billion acquisition envelope. When the decision documents were prepared for Cabinet in 2010, we sought $9 billion for acquisition, $5.7 billion for in-service support over 20 years, and we indicated that we expected that the operating costs of the aircraft over 20 years would be roughly the same as the CF-18 fleet.
And could you tell me the number, sir? I hate to interrupt you. You're telling I don't know what the number for CF-18 is. Do you know what it is?
Yes, it's the same number we used for, basically the same number that we used for the F-35. We said we thought that the operating costs would be similar, so $10 billion over 20 years.
So that number would
I'm
be
sorry,
25.
Mr. Allen, please, sir.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Time has expired. Over now to Mr. Cramp, Vice Chair of the committee. You now have the floor, sir.
Well, thank you, Chair, and certainly welcome to all of our witnesses here today. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we'll try to get some clarity to some of the perceptions or misperceptions that are out there. The bottom line is, at some point, we will need to know exactly how much this is going to cost Canadian taxpayers, so Treasury Board and/or Cabinet will actually make a decision, because, of course, there have been no acquisition to date and no expenditures for acquisition. But when that time does come, obviously information is critical. The Auditor General made it clear that many of the costs are not yet reliably known or cannot even be fully estimated at this point. And that, of course, includes the basic unit, the recurring flyaway costs, which, of course, are debatable in a number of areas. But the cost of the required Canadian modifications. We're not buying, an identical aircraft, as I understand there's 3 models out there. There's obviously going to be cost differentials, and of course the different equipment that is on them will obviously have a significant difference. But going forward, my point to my question to the National Defence would be, at some point in this process, and matter of fact, this might even eventually come to the Secretariat, but I'm asking for an opinion now from National Defence. When will these cost estimates, as this process becomes more complete, when do you anticipate they'll become available?
Mr. Chairman, I would speak just very briefly and then turn it over to the Assistant Deputy Minister Materiel, who has a very close working relationship with the Joint Project Office. Just one point you raised on the issue of the variant. I think there has been a lot of confusion. 3 variants of this aircraft. Canada is buying the one that is most advanced in its flight testing, the conventional takeoff and landing, which is tracking very well in its flight testing. And will be the cheapest of the 3 models. A lot of people use averages of the 3 models and various other numbers. The Joint Project Office's number, which they send to Congress, which has been consistent for the variant we would buy in the years we would buy it, was $75 million, the unit recurring flyaway cost in the SAR 2009 report. That number in the latest report, which we'll build our estimates off of, is up around $85 million. But I would ask the ADM Materiel to speak to how so our acquisition envelope fixed at $9 billion. I would ask the ADM Materiel to speak to the issue of how the estimates for in-service support and operating will be firmed up as we go forward, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead, please, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Deputy Mr. Chair. I just would like to clarify that of the 4 phases of a project, identification, options analysis, where you identify your high-level requirements and do your preliminary estimates and to seek approval in principle to begin a project, and then the definition work where you refine those detailed costs and the plans for infrastructure and weapons and logistics setup, etc. We're still in the options analysis stage. We have not received Treasury Board approval to begin funded definition, in which you do the detailed, refined Canadian unique costing work. But to answer the question specifically, annually, the Joint Strike Fighter Program Office in Washington provides cost estimates to the partners on 2 things. On the unit flyaway cost, the cost of an actual Joint Strike Fighter, by the years in which those aircraft will be produced, and as well their estimates of what in-service support and sustainment would cost. We receive those estimates every spring, and we go down to the Joint Project Office and sit down and have a very detailed, formal dialogue with them to have a detailed understanding of the acquisition piece and the sustainment piece, to which we add anything that would be unique to our fleet of aircraft, our choice of how many simulators, our logistics setup, etc. So that process happens annually and is normally completed by the summer of each year.
Okay, so you're suggesting then there will be a strong monitoring process in place. Are you comfortable with the process right now, or do you think this will be more fully developed within the new Secretariat?
The Secretary will assist us in that not necessarily challenge function, but assistance. The process is as rigorous as it can be for an aircraft that we won't take delivery of for 8 years. And at this point in time, without funded definition activities ongoing for our own costing, we really are price takers in the unit flyway cost and the preliminary estimates of sustainment.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cramp. We're at 5:04. I'm sorry. Your time has expired. Monsieur Ravignon, you have the floor, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all of you for coming today. My question is for Ms. Doré.
From any Treasury Board policies with regards to relevant cost over the useful life of equipment?
Mr. Chair, the Department of National Defense is subject to the policies as any other department or agency.
And when we're talking about the relevant costs over the useful life of equipment, would you calculate that at the Treasury Board on the basis of 20, 30, or 36 years?
Mr. Chair, when we have received submissions from the Department of National Defense concerning the time frame for the costing of the life cycle, 20 years has been deemed to be an appropriate time frame. It is set by the Department of National Defense. The going beyond 20 years are considered too high risk to ensure that the value in contracting with industry would be sustained, or the costs would be going beyond the 20-year mark. And so that for us is considered to be reasonable. And as the Deputy Minister of National Defense indicated, all of the submissions to date that have been presented to the Treasury Board have used a 20-year cost estimate.
With regards to the type of costs, were all types of costs related to the lifetime of the equipment taken into consideration by the Department of National Defense, according to Treasury Board guidelines?
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, as I indicated in my remarks, the project for the F-35 has not come to the Treasury Board for consideration for its acquisition. So we are not in an acquisition stage at this particular juncture, and therefore we have not been analyzing or considering the cost of the acquisition at this particular juncture. As the government's action plan indicates, however, we will review and commission an independent review so that before the proposal comes to the Treasury Board for consideration, there will be a framework that will be setting what those costs should contain.
With regards to the government's 7-point plan, what will the role be for Treasury Board going forward?
There are two specific functions that are attributed in the action plan. The first is that we will commission, as I indicated, an independent review of the DND's acquisition and sustainment project assumptions and potential costs. And then prior to the proposal coming to the Treasury Board, the Cabinet Committee, for consideration, we will review and apply the full due diligence for compliance to Treasury Board policies.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for Monsieur Guimont. Thank you for being here. What was in that short letter from the Department of National Defense that gave you the confidence that PWGSC should not be involved?
The letter was addressed to Mr. Tom Ring, so I'll let him address the specifics of the content.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. As Mr. Guimont said in his opening comments, our supply manual requires that the client department, technical authority in this particular case, give us written confirmation that in a sole source case, the equipment that they're planning on acquiring is the only one that meets their requirements, and that was what the letter said.
As briefly as that?
I don't, excuse me, I don't know exactly precisely how many words were in the letter, but it contained the validation and verification that we sought so that we could indicate that
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like that letter to be tabled to the committee.
That can be done.
Very good. Thank you.
Who signed off on the sole sourcing of the F-35 on the basis of that short letter, and who sent the letter from D&D?
The letter was sent to me from Mr. Ross, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Material.
So let's turn to the recommendations made by the Auditor General, right?
Please, sir.
So could you give me a nutshell? When did PWGSC inform the OAG that they disagreed with the conclusions of paragraphs 2.8?
We have had a number of interactions with the OAG office, and that started pretty much at a level in the interaction where you're getting closer to penultimate draft, first point. Second point, our position with respect to recommendation 2.81 was one where we felt that we had demonstrated some due diligence, as stated by the AG last week. The recommendation 2.81 says we did not demonstrate due diligence. Did not demonstrate due diligence is an absolute. Demonstrate some due diligence is what we did. That is why we had discordance.
Thank you. Sorry, time has expired, and we're over to Mr. Shipley now, who has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to follow up, if I can, Mr. Guimont. As you know, in 2.82 in the report, there was a from the AG that you disagreed with that paragraph. But since then, the ministers have set up a 7-point plan, and we talked a little bit about that. Mr. Deschamps did, I believe, earlier, but which would include the Secretariat. Do you still disagree, or was the disagreement based on an understanding of the wording?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. I feel very comfortable with the statement made by the OAG. That is, some due diligence was exercised, but it was not sufficient. I accept that. I accept that in the sense that on a going forward basis, as explained by Madame Doré, this is not yet reached the preliminary program approval stage. There's further due diligence needed, and the 7-point action plan frames how that due diligence will take place clearly. So on a go-forward basis, absolutely. We are in a department where every procurement, despite the fact they come across as either a competition, look-alike from a distance, they're not. And there's another place where, another point that I would very much agree with the OAG is that this is a rather unique process. Mr. Ring, I don't remember seeing this in the time that I've been in public works. It's a rather 15 years developmental, moving into another phase. So looking back, we should have taken probably a different look at how to undertake that ongoing due diligence. But the 7-point action plan does that on a go-forward basis.
And I think, too, the 7-point action plan was presented, and we have that in its points. But my understanding is that the development in terms of the strategy of how it would come forward and be implemented is the part that's still underway. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Right now, the plan is very clear. The mandate is clear. And we are now framing this into our terminology, terms of reference, that all deputies will sign on to. It sanctions the tiers structure that I described, roles and responsibilities, and maybe that Mr. Ring wants to have a few words about how the Secretariat will be functioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, if I could just draw a link back to an earlier question about the parallels with shipbuilding. That was an experience where there were several attributes that were identified that we felt allowed us to move forward and gave us, we think, a tremendous result in terms of public confidence in that result. In the first instance, it was an openness and transparency in terms of our engagement with all those who would be involved. In the second case, it was an oversight and due diligence through a governance structure that Mr. Guimont has fully explained, so I won't go through that again. And finally, the third attribute is the use of third parties to independently review and validate the decision points and the considerations. Those three attributes we felt were instrumental in the success of shipbuilding. And as Mr. Guimont has indicated, we believe that the 7-point action plan will actually allow us to implement those attributes and arrive at a similar result.
Thank you very much. Okay, I might want to thank you so much. And as I mentioned, we've all had the access to the background of the 7 points. I would like to go to Industry Canada. Mr. Kennedy, if I might. And you talked a little bit in your presentation about the value that our mostly aerospace companies within Canada have been able to benefit from in the development stage. I think it's been clear. No money has been spent on the acquisition of an airplane, but there are different stages in which they develop. Canadian companies have been able to attribute a great amount of success to that, quite honestly. And I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about what those benefits are so that maybe the general public can understand the difference between the acquisition of a plane and actually the development stages in which Industry Canada and our companies in Canada have been able to benefit?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, so the principal difference, the principal benefit would be there's sort of 3 of them. But mainly it's getting in on the ground floor of the development of a brand new piece of technology. So as has been discussed before, the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter project, is really meant to be at the cutting edge in terms of aircraft technology. And so the Canadian companies that participate in the development of that are actually in kind of from very early days in the development of that technology, and that gives them a couple of advantages. One, advantages in the longer term in terms of when the product actually goes into production to actually participate in the building of those pieces. But number 2, having developed this technology, they can then take it and apply it elsewhere in their business. And we do have real examples in Canada of companies that have participated in the development of the JSF who've then been able to take that technology and apply it in other businesses, such as in the civil aircraft business.
Thank you. Your time has now expired, Mr. Shipley. Thank you. And over to our second vice chair, Mr. Byrne. You now have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In relation to the conclusions reached by the Auditor General and the gray area disagreements, would the Deputy Ministers of Public Works and the Deputy Minister of National Defence table to the committee the specific letters that were forwarded to the Auditor General regarding the conclusions reached by the Auditor General?
Yes, I have no problem with that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have limited time, Mr. Chair. We have a number of witnesses before us. I appreciate that Conservative Mr. Delacramp said to us just a little while ago, the last thing we need is to have a whole group of witnesses coming in here, 8 or 9 witnesses at one point, and not being able to dig down and drill down when we should and when we need to. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 witnesses before us, and the witness list was just presented to the committee members at 7:22. The final witness list at 7:22 a.m. this morning. So, Mr. Chair, I'll say that I wish we had more time. I would like to have you all back again. I'll ask Mr. Fomberg. You had indicated that in terms of full life cycle cost reporting, this is the way you've done it for 20 years in terms of tactical aircraft acquisition. Nobody should be surprised that in 2008 or 2009 that's the way we did it. That's the way we informed our cabinet ministers. That's the way we informed Parliament. Is that a fair categorization?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Mr. Chairman?
You told us that the way that you presented information in 2008 and 2009 was the way you did life cycle cost descriptions for 20 years. Not to include like the costs that were included in the Auditor General's report, the costs that were included in the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report. The discrepancy is created because they included costs which you normally hadn't included for a 20-year period. So nobody should be surprised that if you've done something for 20 years that process would be repeated in 2008 and 2009. Is that correct?
I don't mean to be difficult. I'm not sure the 2008-2009 reference. I spoke to the issue of the last 4 and then the consistency of the 5th major air asset acquisition since 2004, and that in each case, Mr. Chairman, we have publicly spoken to the issue of acquisition costs and sustainment costs, and that operating costs are affordable and prioritized within our within our budget, which goes before Parliament every year. Total costs of all of our fleets to operate, air, land, and sea,
Understood.
are close to about $4.8 billion a year, approved by Parliament every year.
Trying to give you a way out here, Mr. Fomberg, because in 2010, and I'll just pick up on my colleague's point, something changed with the Auditor General's report of the acquisition of the Chinook helicopters, is that, you agreed that the past practices on full life cycle reporting were not adequate. So what I was trying to help you out here with, sir, is that if you made a life cycle acquisition cost in 2008 and 2009 and reported that and got Cabinet to use those figures, nobody should be blaming the Department of National Defence for using that in any calculation of F-35 costs prior to 2010. Prior to, if you were to describe to Cabinet, this is the way we do business. Sir, when you agreed with the Auditor General's report on the acquisition, the problems with the acquisition in the Chinook aircraft in Chapter 6, did you agree that from that point forward, from June of 2010 forward, you would use a new methodology in reporting to Cabinet and to Parliament about life cycle cost reporting?
There's a number of questions there, but I do appreciate the member's offer to help me on this. I believe in 2010, we'd have to go back to the action plan, that we undertook to develop appropriate methodologies to life cycle cost. And we are in the process of developing those methodologies. I would say just one thing, and the CFO may want to speak to this in response to a question, Mr. Chairman. There is a difference between, and people I think get a little bit confused, between the total cost of ownership of something and the life cycle cost of a project or an acquisition. And so it is accurate to say that we agreed to address the methodological issues in the 2010, following the 2010 report. But we also acknowledge in our management action plan that it would take us time to develop those methodologies. Life cycle costing is not a simple issue.
Well, Mr. Fomberg, if I could, let me ask this. Based on the Auditor General's Chinook helicopter report and the recommendations and your acceptance of the recommendations in terms of reporting of life cycle costs, would the $9 billion acquisition cost figure and the $16 billion cost sustainment or operational cost figure, as presented by the Auditor General and by the public, and roughly by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, would those be the correct numbers that you would have reported if you were to follow the recommendations and keep true the recommendations of the Chinook helicopter report?
Briefly, please.
I don't know, because we actually haven't done it. We have reported $9 billion for acquisition. That is the envelope. $5.7 for sustainment. And I think, as you all know, $10 billion, the estimate for operating, which we will firm up over time.
Thank you. Sorry, time's expired. Moving on now, Mr. Aspen, your speaking spot.
Thank you, Chair. And at this time, I will defer my questions and my time to my colleague, Christopher Alexander.
Very good. Mr. Alexander, welcome again, sir, and you now have the floor.
Thank you. As I was saying at our last meeting, before being rather rudely interrupted, the government has accepted the recommendation. The government has accepted the conclusions of the Auditor General's report. And I want that to be on the record, both because it relates to the question I want to ask and because Mr. Byrne was seeking to obscure those facts at the end of our last meeting. My question is for Mr. Guimont from the Deputy Minister of Public Works. It strikes us on this side, sir, that the Auditor General's conclusions relate to three main items. One is the sequencing of decisions. The second concern he had related to full life cycle costs, which we've talked about at some length. And the third related to the whole question of a risk management framework for this unique project, which we've all agreed has characteristics we haven't seen before in defense procurement in Canada because of the scale and nature of the project. Could you, Mr. Guimont, outline for us how the 7-point plan and your oversight of the Secretariat will serve to mitigate those three areas of concern that the Auditor General raised in his report and discussed with us at our last meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. I would say that the approach we will take in the Secretariat, we are going to focus on the tasks and priorities outlined in the 7-point action plan. We will look at the work that has been carried out for the F-35 program, and there's obviously a clear highlight on the issue of costs. It's front and center on the 7-point action plan. So those will be two key elements: review of the work carried out to this point, together with a clear understanding of costing. We will, in achieving this, or as we carry out our work, measuring ourselves against the observations made by the OAG. We will use, there is a document that clearly speaks to certain deficiencies, concerns, and that's the way we're going to be measuring the progress of the work we're going to be carrying out for the steps taken on the F-35, including the cost issues. That's the strategy or approach we're going to be using. That will address the issue of sequencing. It will address the issue of risk management. That's the thinking, as picked up by, highlighted, I should say, by the OAG.
Thank you for that answer. My next question is for my colleagues from National Defense. We focused so far overwhelmingly on the program to acquire an aircraft to replace the CF-18s. They're aging. And it is a very important program, but as you've all said, it's still at the pre-acquisition stage with a long way to run. In the meantime, there is a program underway to develop a joint strike fighter that involves Canada and roughly 10 other countries in one way or another. And there was praise in the Auditor General's report for the way your department, Mr. Fonberg, handled Canada's involvement in that program, generating industrial benefits for Canadian companies, generating an opportunity for us to take part in a technological breakthrough in the field of military aircraft. Could you describe for the committee, so that we all understand the benefits of this program to date for Canada, how you managed that program successfully and what the main ingredients of success to date have been in ensuring over 60 Canadian companies participate in the world's leading fighter jet development program?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will just say a couple of things. When we worked with the Auditor General or worked with his office on this report, I think we all recognized that stepping back over 15 years, this truly was a unique program that allowed us, with 9 other partners from the beginning of 1997, to spread the developmental risks, the technological risks, the cost risks of development, where most of that was actually being absorbed by the United States. Dan Ross has been intimately involved with the program and the MOUs and development costs since, since his tenure in that job. I'll turn to Dan for a minute just to talk about the unique nature and the benefits. Dan.
Thank you, Chairman. My organization has been involved in the program since 1997, and I have a very small section that were instrumental working with Industry Canada in working with industry and leveraging opportunities for Canadian companies in a very proactive manner. As Mr. Kennedy said, or could say, our aerospace industry is the 3rd largest in the world amongst the partners in the program. And so for very small investments, in 1997, our initial contribution was $10 million. In 2002, $100 million U.S. And then in 2006, went to Treasury Board to continue to participate in the production development and follow-on development, production sustainment and follow-on development phase, which gave us and gave specifically the RCF unprecedented access to highly classified information. It also, as Industry Canada has mentioned, gave Canadian industry access to the development of new technology that's leading edge and will be exportable worldwide. Back in 2006, we clearly felt that there was no obligation to buy a Joint Strike Fighter at that time, but it continued to have the door open to Canadian companies and a door open to my staff and the Air Force staff to the privileged information of how the program was developing. We looked at the Joint Strike Fighter at that time as continuing to be a viable option. And as we told government at that time, we would come back in the 2010 to 2012 timeframe to propose a solution to replace the CF18.
Okay, I'm sorry, time is well expired. Thank you both very much. Over now to Madame Blachette-Lamothe. You have the floor, Madame.
Merci. Thank you very much. I think I'll follow up on the issue of industrial and regional benefits. Would you agree in saying that those forecasts really are used in supporting key decisions on the part of the government to join the JSF program and acquire F-35s, yes or no?
Simon, would you like to answer?
Thank you for the question. Industry Canada is responsible for working on the industrial...
I'll just interrupt you because I have several questions, so I just want to know yes or no you agree in saying that forecasts, estimates of those industrial benefits are very important in the decision-making process with respect to participation in this kind of acquisition process.
Of the government. Industry Canada gives advice on what the likely industrial participation benefits will be for industry, but the primary driver of acquisitions is the defense needs of the country, and Industry Canada comes in after those needs are defined to work on what the industrial benefits would be.
So it does play a role, even if it's not the only factor. Yes. Thank you. The Auditor General, however, stated his concerns with respect to those forecasts or projections of industrial benefits, and he stated that the documents for the purposes of decision-making do not give accurate estimates of those benefits and therefore does not allow accurate decision-making based on those projections. So is there that transparency then in those estimates?
Work actually goes into the development of the estimates that that you're talking about. So, but just very briefly, the government receives twice a year from the prime contractors a very detailed list of all of their requirements that they need for the manufacture of the aircraft, as well as a detailed list of all the Canadian companies that they believe can play a role. We sit down with the prime contractors twice a year to go through that list and discuss it with them and validate it. And in addition to that, we have site visits with many, many Canadian companies who are interested in the program or part of the program to, in effect, do triangulation, to actually discuss with the Canadian firms their view of what the prime contractors are saying. So all of that actually, a fairly significant amount of work goes into the numbers that you see in the documents.
Merci. Vous me dites qu'il y a beaucoup. Thank you. So you're saying that a lot of work goes into this. You've explained what it is, but that's not my question. My question is if you agree, because the Auditor General brought this up in his report, that information documents prepared by departments for decision makers and ministers did not give the basis of those projections and did not take into account the limits of those projections. So do you agree there was information lacking for the purposes of those decision makers when it came to industrial benefits, or do you disagree with what the Auditor General stated in his report?
That certainly in hindsight, we probably could have provided, more detailed information, perhaps presented the information differently. Having said that, I think there has been very clear, it's been very clear since the outset of this program that this is a very different approach, that the nature of the opportunities were contingent, and we did our best to provide estimates to the government of what the potential total amount could be. But it's been very clear in our discussions with the industry over the last 10 years. In fact, we were doing road shows with the industry as far back as 10 years ago to discuss the very different nature of this procurement and the fact that companies would have to compete on a best value basis. And I think if one were to look at the testimony of ministers both before committees of the House of Commons as well as when the announcement was made in 2006 of the MOU with the companies, it was quite clear that the basis of this approach was one that was a best value basis and that companies had to compete. So I think it's been very clear that this is not a standard procurement, that there is uncertainty in terms of the total value, and we've done our best to try to provide projections to the government of what the maximum amount of the opportunities might be. But could we have, perhaps given a better breakdown or provided more detailed information? We certainly take that to heart.
Vous nous dites peut-être. So you stated that perhaps. So you're acknowledging then the need to provide more, given the concerns of the Auditor General. So perhaps you could do better, and you're saying you'll do better next time.
carefully at his recommendations and looking at ways that we can provide a fuller picture of the potential opportunities going forward.
En fait, c'est pas une recommandation formelle, c'est pour ça.
That's not a formal recommendation, so that's why I wanted to highlight that. But another point with respect to projections is this. Thank you. Only one scenario apparently was put forward, an optimal scenario, rather than providing other scenarios than only the most optimistic one. Would you say then that when you're putting forward those scenarios, you could do better? That is to say, you could present different scenarios that would help decision makers make their decisions based on a range of scenarios rather than only one, and that one being the most optimistic?
That we're well aware of the comments the Auditor General has made in that area. Certainly in the past, you know, at the very early development of this project, there were ranges developed. As we actually had a prime contractor selected and we've gone further along, we felt we had good information to provide kind of the upper bound, but really there wasn't necessarily the same basis of information to start making projections of what a lower bound could be. And we'll have to go back and take a look at that. But as I say, I think the concern about ranges is tempered by the fact that it's been common knowledge in the industry and within government circles for many years now that this is a project where people have to compete and compete to win. So there's been no uncertainty about the fact that there is some contingency to the opportunities.
Thank you very much. Time has well expired. Moving over to Madame Bateman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to share my time with my colleague, Laurie Hahn.
Giving him the full 5 minutes. Very good. Thank you, Madame.
So share.
Mr. Chair, thank you to our witnesses. I've got a number of questions. First one, Mr. Fonberg, and this I think will be a brief reply. It's been suggested, and this is just for the record, it's been suggested that D&D kept 2 sets of books on the F-35. Could you comment on that very briefly?
No, we just had 1 set of books.
Thank you. For Mr. Lindsay, we talked about the PBO's assumptions in his top-down analysis. Was the basis of his cost projection of $148 million or whatever, was the problem with that it was based on the average of the 3 models and not just on the F-35?
No, Mr. Chair. In this case, the PBO's estimate was based on the variant that Canada is going to buy, but on a point on the production and learning curve far behind where we actually are today. And as a consequence, that number was significantly overstated from the SAR 2009 acquisition cost.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Farnberg, we talked about the fact that D&D has typically used for many, many years, 20 years, to project life cycle costs. I would suggest because of the risk of all the unknowables, cost of fuel in 20, 30, 40 years, missions the airplane might undertake, technological challenges that come along. My recollection of the F-18 program was that that was the same process that was applied there. We had projected the airplane to be for phase-in plus 15 years, which would have taken to 2003 when we'd be looking for new aircraft, which, in fact, we have been doing. Could you comment on the fact that that has been methodology, notwithstanding what's going to happen going forward, but that has been the methodology through successive governments of both stripes?
I think that's actually true. ADM Matt could actually speak to that in a little bit more detail, but at the 20-year point, especially on sustainment, Mr. Chairman, is when the confidence bands really start to weaken around estimates, especially for sustainment, as well as the other things that you spoke to on the question of operating. Dan, would you like to say anything on that issue?
Yes, Deputy. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the Deputy said, we've consistently used these estimates 20 years for our air program since 2004. There really is a significant amount of uncertainty in aerospace technology costs when you get beyond the 20 years, and it becomes very difficult to predict. We have 60 years of experience in flying jet fighters, and we understand how difficult it is to predict those technical and structural issues. And I will give you one example that, Mr. Hahn, you're familiar with, is we introduced the CF-18, which was a new aircraft at that time, and we experienced structural issues with vertical stabilizers, totally unpredictable, and we had to resolve those issues. The last comment I would make would be that over the past 7 years, we've tried to put in place performance-based long-term in-support contracts for our air fleets, like the new Hercules 130J. Industry came back to us and told us that they could not agree to long-term rates without adding large price increases to mitigate the uncertainty of future costs. So we ended up negotiating 20-year contracts based on firm fixed rates for only 5 years at a time.
Okay. Thank you,
sir.
Now, Mr. Farnberg, it's also been stated that $25 billion budgets have been approved in Cabinet, which clearly is not true. Could you comment on how the actual budget approval process would work as the program progresses?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. On the issue of acquisition, the government has been clear that there will be a $9 billion acquisition envelope. At the time of the decision in 2010, we put forward for approval a $5.7 billion envelope estimate for in-service support and sustainment, and we acknowledged that we expected the operating costs to be similar to those of the F-18 on the order of $10 billion over 20 years. The affordability within our budget would actually be checked off in much greater detail when those documents cleared Cabinet, finally got to Treasury Board, which they haven't done yet. And the Treasury Board, and my colleague can confirm this, will ensure that those estimates are affordable within our base budget, which comes back to Parliament every year in the appropriations process.
Thank you. For General Deschamps, there's been criticism from people about the actual airplane and the test program and so on, criticism from people who clearly have no knowledge of test programs and what they're designed to do. Is it fair to say that a test program, like we did with the F-18, like is happening with the F-35, is specifically designed to discover faults, to find faults, so they can then be corrected before the aircraft goes into production, and that because an airplane fails some test point in the test program doesn't mean the airplane won't do its job?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. I think it's fair to say that, as been pointed out, we've been flying fighters, Canada for certainly in the Allies, for over 60 years, and there's been a lot learned on how to do test and evaluation. If you've seen the movie The Right Stuff, you know what it looked like in the 50s and 60s, where there was high risk in testing new platforms. We've moved such a long way now. Obviously, there's always surprises in test and development. They're quite a lot lower than they were 20, 30 years ago. But there still will be discovery as they do these testing and development phases. So we're certainly not perturbed in the sense that they will discover challenges as the airframe is pushed to a wider envelope, as it is supposed to do in its test and evaluation phase. But at the same time, that discovery phase is useful, because the last thing you want is have these airplanes deployed and then, 5 years after we're in use, find these faults that will be far more problematic to repair, or if they're even repairable after they're on the line. So we're quite happy to see the discovery phase take care of those issues ahead of procurement for us.
Thank you. Sorry, time has expired, Mr. Hahn. Thank you. Moving over now to Mr. Byrne. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Farnberg, do you still hold true that your statement that the life cycle costs of the CF-18 Hornet and the F-35 are identical? Do you hold that view today?
I don't think I ever said the life cycle cost of the CF-18 and the F-35 were identical, Mr. Chairman. I don't.
Maybe I misinterpreted. I thought you said the operational costs of the CF-18 and the F-35 are
No,
identical.
I think what I said was that for decision purposes, Mr. Chairman, we informed Cabinet and the decision makers that we thought that the operating costs of the F-35 would be in a similar zone all up to the operating costs of the F-18 fleet. I believe that that's...
Do you still hold that view true?
As an estimate, it's the best estimate that we have right now, yes.
You've never been informed by the U.S. Joint Strike Fighter Program Office that to suggest anything contrary to that?
Well, I can turn over to Mr. Ross. I don't believe that the Joint Strike Fighter Program would have a particular view about our operating costs, but Dan, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chair. The Joint Strike Fighter Office gives us estimates of acquisition cost for a flyaway F-35. You put ammunition and fuel in. And they also give us estimates for maintenance, repair, overhaul, what we call sustainment. They don't give us estimates on how we would pay salaries or fix buildings or provide base services in Bagotville and Cold Lake, which is what the deputy is referring to as operating costs.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. So you've so notwithstanding the actual U.S. Joint Strike Fighter Office, Program Office, you've received no other information from any other source which would cause you to question that particular linear equation, that one-to-one cost estimate?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. We haven't entered the detailed definition phase yet, and when we do, we will do detailed studies on any infrastructure we need to upgrade in Baggville and Coal Lake, on how many simulators, training, and those detailed operating cost estimates when we get into definition.
Thank you. Mr. Fongler, what is the number that you would now report to this parliamentary committee as the total acquisition and total operational sustainment costs over the life cycle of the F-35? Is it different than the, I'll just use these numbers descriptively, the $9 billion and $6 billion figure, or would you now switch it to the $16 and $9 billion figure?
Just to be clear, CFO may want to comment on this. The numbers we use very clearly, Mr. Chairman, $9 billion acquisition envelope, $5.7 billion for sustainment for 20 years, operating cost estimates of $10 billion within our base budget for a 20-year period.
But you never reported the $10 billion to Parliament. You just reported the $9 billion operations sustainment and the $6 billion capital acquisition. The $10 billion is what's unique, and the cause for the Auditor General to suggest that Parliament was misinformed and potentially Cabinet was misinformed, but that's another story. What I'm asking then is, if you were to use the recommendations as outlined in Chapter 6 in the Auditor General's report, Chapter 6, the acquisition of the Chinook helicopters, that was received by Parliament in June of 2010, I believe, and you accepted all of the recommendations. The Department of National Defence, the Government of Canada accepted all of the recommendations. What number would you report now to a parliamentary committee and therefore to Parliament as the appropriate number? That
well, again, to be clear, Mr. Chairman, I believe the report that the member is referring to is November 2010, not June of 2010, which came sometime after we did our estimates. As I said, we accepted the Auditor General's report recommendation on producing appropriate life cycle costs 60 days after we receive our information from the United States. I don't have an answer to the question about if we went back and tried to apply the method.
Mr. Fomberg, that's very important, sir, because in November of 2010, and I appreciate the correction, in November of 2010, the Department of National Defence, the Department of Public Works Government Services, and the Government of Canada promised Parliament they would do things differently. I respect and understand, sir, that any analysis or cost description prior to November 2010 could potentially be different using the 20-year methodology. But after November 2010, a commitment was given to Parliament that we would use a new methodology. And any information that was given after 2010 that differed than what was compared to what you promised you would do results in a contempt of Parliament, in my opinion. Was any information given to Parliament after November 2010 which was contrary to what you promised, the Department, not you, sir, but the Department and the Government of Canada promised it would do?
I guess I just need some clarification, Mr. Chairman. November 2010.
I think you do.
Yeah, I actually do.
All right, we're over time, so I'm going to ask you to briefly respond,
Okay,
Mr.
November
Blomberg.
2010, we provided a management action plan to respond to the recommendation of the Auditor General's report. We have been working in a very clear and deliberate manner on developing the methodologies for life cycle costing in response to that report. On the question of whether we have provided alternative estimates since that time, I'd have to go back and look at the record. I actually don't recall, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Over to Mr. Hayes, who now has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is great that we're doing this. The level of scrutiny before any money has actually been spent is unprecedented. So it's good that we're doing this now as opposed to afterwards and finding out for some reason that we have actually overspent. My first question would be to Mr. Guimont. Can you explain the process that leads to a sole source decision and how it played out in this particular circumstance?
I'll say, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say a few words using the one-pager that I appended to my remarks, and I'll let Mr. Ring expand on this. The technical authority, in this case D&D, could be another department. If it were vaccine, could be PHAC, Health Canada, essentially comes up with the basic requirements, and we refer them as statement of requirements. And as they do this, they also carry out analysis. They look if there is a potential competitive field at the macro level. So they carry out a number of very in-depth reviews, and they start interacting with us, and our responsibility is one of validating that either a competition is to be had, because there is a procurement a competitive field, or that a sole source justification is justified. If we see and validate that the rationale provided, as explained by Mr. Ring before, supports a sole source acquisition, this is allowed on the Government of Canada contracting regulation. And there's a number of exceptions, if I remember 4 of them. And one has to do with value, $25K, below $25,000. One has to do with emergency, kind of makes sense. One has to do with public interest. And one has to do with it's the sole company that can meet the requirements identified by the technical authority and validated by the contracting authority. I'll just let Mr. Ring say a few more words about this. It's a very important field.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as Mr. Guimont has just outlined, the government policy is for the competitive sourcing of all solicitations, but there are exceptions as noted, and the role of Public Works is to work with the client department in making sure that the justification or rationale for an exception to the government contracting regulations is fully justified. The client department must provide that rationale for why they are seeking an exemption. And in fact, there is quite an extensive checklist that's in our Treasury Board guidelines that must be filled out. And the Department of Public Works works with the client department to make sure that that justification is extensive, is on file and available, and can support the rationale for justifying that only one supplier can do the work. And that was all done in this particular case.
Thank you. And Mr. Guimont, again, the Auditor General, he's made a number of findings on this process. And now that you've had time to reflect on his report, what would you have done differently on this file?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to note, Mr. Chairman, that we didn't really have a problem with the findings, the facts put forward by the OAG. So that's something which is important. There was no really recommendation directed at Public Works. It was directed at D&D, so that I just mentioned that. The bone of contention, I guess you say in English, l'endroit où on a un peu une différence d'opinion.
Where we have a bit of a difference of opinion was very specifically on 2.81.
We feel we took commensurate due diligence measures because this procurement process is far from being over, so due diligence will continue as per the 7-point action plan. And the statement made was more one of an absolute did not exercise, and that was like, so what we would do differently, frankly, is captured largely in the 7-point action plan. This is a big procurement. We look back at shipbuilding, which Mr. Ring and colleagues around the table managed, and it is a very good framework to apply to a major procurement of that style, which is unusual. I'm not saying that the shipbuilding identical governance structure would have to be applied to all committees, to all the procurement. But if there is a very unique procurement, this is a good fit. And Mr. Ring spoke about the attributes of the National Shipbuilding Strategy to make a difference between that and structure. And these attributes are fully applicable to that procurement. So the lessons learned here is one of looking back. We could have earlier on said we should better define roles, responsibilities. This is going to be a different procurement, developmental in nature, very long, 15 years. Let's put in place a structure that will carefully monitor and create the necessary oversight and transparency vis-a-vis parliamentarians and citizens. And, you know, to me, that's a big lesson. But, you know, that's water under the bridge. We are putting it now. No decision has been made in the context of an acquisition purchase. So the time is right for the action plan to deliver on those commitments.
Thank you. Time has expired, Mr. Hayes. Thank you. Now over to Mr. Allen. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. To Mr. Fonnenberg. Mr. Fonnenberg, I'm referring to the AG's report. I recognize you don't have it in front of you. It's page 27. It's chart Exhibit 2.6. It's actually a chart. The source, according to the Auditor General's report, is indeed National Defence. The title of the top column says National Defence Estimates Used for Decision-Making June 2010. It goes through the $6 billion, that, says $6 billion, talks about couple acquisition cost aircraft, talks about additional acquisition cost, 8.9, and it goes through the different pieces. It talks about personnel operating and maintenance costs of 16.14, gives me a total of 25.120. Is that a fair assessment of what the department did at that time?
June 2000, yes, I believe it is, Mr. Chairman.
And beside that chart, there's an additional piece that talks about National Defence's public response to the PBO officer report of March 2011. It shows 6 and 9 and 5,700, which is $5,700,000 for contracted sustainment, gives us a total of 14.7. Sir, you said earlier to Mr. Hahn you didn't have two books. What exactly are those two estimates?
One is acquisition and sustainment, which is the way that we've reported on each of our acquisitions over the last 4 major airframe assets. And the other one includes operating costs, which we haven't reported on publicly because it's included in the base budget of the Department of National Defense.
So in other words, sir, are you saying that the first one I quoted to you, the $25 billion one, was that reported to the Minister and Cabinet?
Yes.
And the second, was that reported publicly in your view?
Was what reported publicly?
25-1. $25 billion. Did you ever report it publicly?
No, I believe. June 2010 we reported the right-hand column. The left-hand column was decision-making.
So what you're
right.
So to be clear, you're telling me that you were telling the Minister 25.1, you were telling the Canadian public 14.7? Is that correct to assume, sir?
Mr. Chairman, what we told the Canadian public was exactly what the government has told the Canadian public.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, Mr. Fonnenberg. I don't actually need an explanation. I just need to know, is the report of 25.1 to the public or to the Minister? You've said to the Minister. I want to know, did you ever report to the general public and to the Parliament that it was 25.1, or did you maintain it's 14.7?
Mr. Chairman,
you went at it quite often and told us about how it's different, but you said you only had one book, sir. So one book is one book in my view. So either you had a book that said 25.1 or you had a book that said 14.7. You can't have two unless you had two books, but you said you only had one. So I'm going by you have one book. So why didn't you tell us the same figures from the same book to two different people, two different groups of people, the Cabinet and the Canadian public?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. There was one book. The column on the left-hand side went to Cabinet for decision-making purposes, and the government decided to communicate exactly the same way that it communicated since 2004 on the acquisition of major airframe assets, acquisition costs and sustainment costs. We were not seeking incremental funding from Cabinet at the time for operating costs, nor do we expect to be seeking incremental funding for operating costs.
Thank you. So you're saying you told Cabinet it was $25 billion and the Cabinet told the Canadian public it was $10 billion less. Thank you, sir. To Mr. Ross, sir, you said earlier that we are at the initial analysis phase of the F-35. Although I may disagree, I think we're actually further along in the timeline, but I'll take you at your word. So does that mean, sir, that if we're at that stage, are we now going to look at other planes besides the flying piano dubbed the F-35?
I think I would return to my deputy colleagues or to Chief of the Air Staff in terms of going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the best way to frame the answer here is the F-35 is the aircraft that we assessed in 2010 as the platform that met our needs, all our requirements. The fact that it's still doing testing and development is certainly what's occupying a lot of our attention right now, and any issues of cost.
For brevity's sake, Chief, I understand that you're going to take me through that, and I'd love to talk to you for an hour about it, but I only get 5 minutes. So basically, we're saying we're not looking at other options. Is that fair to say?
Currently, from an Air Force perspective,
Yes.
we are focused on delivering the transition to the F-35.
Thank you. Mr. Fonnenberg, it was said earlier under testimony that the costs are up 13% on the F-35. We know the budget is frozen. The Prime Minister has told us that the envelope is $9 billion. If costs are up 13%, sir, and that's testimony from the end of the table, not from me. If they're up 13%, 65 was the number we could procure at $9 billion. If the costs are up 13%, sir, how many can we buy now, knowing you've got a frozen envelope?
I actually didn't do the math, Mr. Chairman. I said 75, now around 85, so if that's 13%, that's fine. That is manageable within the context, if you go back to Exhibit 2.6, Mr. Chairman, of the allowance for contingency and inflation.
Thank you. Time's expired. Sorry. Over. I know. Now over to Mr. Dreesen. You have the floor, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Allen was attempting to put a few words in your mouth. Mr. Fonnenberg, I just wonder if you would like to first of all take an opportunity to clarify where you were going there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that opportunity, that I don't think the government was trying to put any other words in anybody's mouth. We worked off the left-hand column. The right-hand column was how we responded to the parliamentary budget officer, exact same categories, trying to demonstrate that the parliamentary budget officer, as far as we could tell, also did not use operating costs. The Auditor General picked up from decision-making documents, laid it beside what we responded to the parliamentary budget officer. The Auditor General could just as easily have put in the parliamentary budget officer's column, and there would have been much more clarity on that issue.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Second question again to Defence. I wonder if you could expand on the validity of using a weight-based comparison for assessments or for estimating costs.
A very interesting question because as far as we could tell, the parliamentary budget officer found or built his $148 million per aircraft estimate based on the actual weight of the aircraft. I would turn either to ADM Meta or perhaps to the CFO on the methodological question around the appropriateness of using that to build the price of an aircraft.
Thank you, Deputy. Mr. Chair, there is a fair amount of historical data that demonstrates at the very early conceptual stages of an aircraft a correlation between the anticipated weight of the aircraft and a rough order of magnitude estimate of its cost. That is the basis upon which the PBO estimated the acquisition cost of the aircraft. The methodology they used, which derives from a private sector company, and the database derives from a private sector company in the UK, led them to use an assumed acquisition cost of $148.5 million US. This was at a time when the Joint Project Office in the United States provided us its best estimate of an acquisition cost of $75 million for the aircraft. The rest of the PBO's analysis is really quite simple, basic arithmetic. In order to arrive at logistics cost, it multiplies the acquisition cost by a factor by the number of aircraft. It does the same for operating costs. The key is, if you have got the acquisition cost wrong, you're going to wind up with an estimate that is far, far off the mark. If you get the initial acquisition cost way wrong, your total estimated cost is going to be far off the mark. So, given the assumed acquisition cost in the PBO report of $148.5 million versus the 75, if the PBO had used the 75 number, kept all other variables in his methodology constant, he would have arrived at an estimate of $17.2 billion, which is remarkably close to the estimate that we had for acquisition and sustainment, which is part of the reason we were led to believe that the PBO's numbers did not include these operating costs.
My next question then, could you explain with the access point to the cost acquisition curve, how that gives you the confidence of that 75 to 85 million that you were talking about versus some of the numbers that we hear, because as time goes on and the date that you plan on accessing this particular asset is I think what's critical to all of this.
Dan, do you want to see the convergence of the cost curves over the various SAR reports?
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mr. Chair. Thanks for that opportunity. The Joint Strike Fighter Program Office work is based on hundreds of thousands of hours of detailed work by experts, project managers, engineers, test experts, and costers, and actual contract expenses that have gone into the 40 or so Joint Strike Fighters that are being produced. The estimates going forward are called selected acquisition reports. In the 2010 decision was based on the SAR 09 acquisition report. That was at about 75 million per aircraft. The 10 rose slightly to about 83 million, and the latest to about 85 million. So what we're seeing is that curve of very high cost to build the first prototype sinking downwards to the most efficient point of production where we're going to buy is becoming very tight. The variation is becoming very small year to year because their degree of understanding of what the cost will be is getting very high, and the fixed inputs to setting up production have been done. Testing is well progressed. The remaining technical issues are being resolved, and so the degree of confidence is becoming much higher. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And time has expired, so I thank you for that. And that takes us once through our speaking rotation, colleagues. We still have 15 minutes on the clock. I would draw your attention to the fact that as of right now, given the decision by this committee and its wisdom to eliminate the steering committee, we're not as well planned going forward as we have been. However, we do manage. At this point, however, we have nothing scheduled for, I see your hand, Mr. Saxton. We have nothing scheduled for Thursday. I see a number of hands shooting up, and that's good. That's what I was hoping for. I would have a suggestion for you. There has been some questioning around PBO numbers. There's been some questioning about Auditor General numbers. Whether this committee wants to have a further hearing is, of course, in the hands of this committee, and that can be scheduled for Thursday if we wish. Or we can schedule a continuation of this for a week from now, and on Thursday we could meet to do report writing, and we could do any forward planning after that you'd like. I'm in your hands. But we do need to make a decision within the next 13 minutes as to what we're going to do at the next meeting, or there won't be one. So I'm in your hands, and then after we've decided that, if there's time, we can decide what we want to do for the balance of this meeting for the few moments that may remain, although I have a hunch that may evaporate pretty quick. We'll see. Mr. Saxton, I will recognize you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with your comments, and we do need to plan ahead. And so in that spirit, I would like to propose a motion to the committee at this time, and that motion would read that on May the 3rd, 2012, the committee hear from the Parliamentary Budget Officer for its first hour, and the witnesses here today from the Departments of D&D, PWG, SC, TBS, and Industry Canada for its second hour as part of its study of Chapter 2 of the Auditor General of Canada's Spring 2012 report.
Okay. Do you have a, let me just throw at you, bringing the AG back for the PBO part, since there was a question of his numbers, would that be helpful?
I think we take it one step at a time. Let's, I put this motion forward.
Okay. Okay, good. I'll take that motion then. So the motion is, again, to continue Thursday. First hour would be the PBO. Second hour would be a continuation of our guest today. That's the motion. It's in order. I'll now put that before the committee. Mr. Allen, on the motion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And in the spirit of cooperation to my friend across the way, I appreciate his endeavors to bring the PBO and our witnesses here back on Thursday. I would like to amend it, though, to include that we have the AG come back next week, which at the earliest opportunity, which of course would be Tuesday morning. for at least an hour, and indeed if the other hour, whether it be the second hour of the day, I don't really care, or the first hour, and indeed if our witnesses down the end are not completed on Thursday in the second hour, that they come back for the first hour. So it simply keeps us some flexibility. And so what it basically would be the addition of the AG, whether that, if we're finished with all of these witnesses on Thursday, the AG would be the first hour. If not, the AG would be the second hour, and our witnesses would continue the first hour of next Tuesday, which would be a week today. But I thank the Parliamentary Secretary for his overtures to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk to all of the folks in full testimony.
All right. In that same spirit, is there a possibility that could be a friendly amendment, Mr. Saxton? Do you see that consistent with where you were going?
I think it could be a friendly amendment, part of it. I think that we would be fine with having the Auditor General come back for the first hour, as Mr. Allen had suggested, and I would accept that amendment to my motion.
All right. Are you good with that then, Mr. Allen? We'll fold that into the motion that we will do the first hour with the PBO on Thursday. Second hour will be continuation. The following Tuesday, the first hour will be the Auditor General, and the second hour is to be determined.
We say that could be a planning session, or to be determined is okay.
Wait, leave it at, I'm trying to go for unanimity if I can here. If you can leave it at that, I think that might get us close. Colleagues, can I just quickly, does anybody have a problem with that? Does anybody need to speak to it? Is that can you accept that as a work plan going forward, colleagues? Mr. Byrne?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I can. I certainly can. It sounds like a good idea. I would have liked to have even more time with these particular group of witnesses, because there's some witnesses that we really didn't hear much from because of the limitations of time. I will also ask, after dealing with this motion, I have a motion that's already been tabled on the floor of the committee, calling for the production of documents. Many of these documents were actually referred by our witnesses during the course of their testimony, such as the actual statement of operational requirements, the Public Works Government Services statement that confirms the validity of the statement of operational requirements. I'd like to go ahead and pass this motion. I'm not going to ask for a friendly amendment to it, but as soon as we deal with this, if we could deal with my motion on the production of documents, I'd appreciate it, and do so in a public way.
Okay, I did recognize Monsieur Ravignon, so I will go to him before I go to you, but I will allow you that opportunity. On the motion, however, that's before us. A quick show of hands. All those in favor, please show. That's your motion, Mr. Saxton, as amended through friendly discussion. All those in favor, please indicate down. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion's carried and so ordered. Monsieur Ravignon, you asked for the floor earlier. That's now gone by. Thank you. Mr. Byrne, you have the floor, and you're bringing forward your notice of motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My notice of motion reads as follows: that the committee request in electronic form that the Department of National Defence and the Department of Public Works and Government Services Canada provide it with the following documents: the document that confirms the validity of the Statement of Operational Requirement, the actual Statement of Operational Requirement, the full life cycle cost analysis, the Statement of Work and Performance Specification, bracket, acquisition and in-service support, end bracket, the bid evaluation criteria, the Treasury Board submission for the F-35, the requisition form for goods and services sent to Public Works and Government Services Canada from National Defence, the questionnaires explaining the decision to proceed with the sole source process for this acquisition, the cost analysis for the infrastructure modification to operate the F-35, the risk analysis produced by the Department of National Defence and Public Works and Government Services Canada for the acquisition of the F-35, the cost analysis to keep the actual CF-18 operational until 2023, the cost analysis for phasing out the CF-18, the option analysis for the replacement of the CF-18, and that the committee request this information within 5 calendar days.
Very good. Motion's in order. It's before you. It's debatable. Mr. Byrne, did you wish to say anything further?
No, I think, Mr. Chair,
no, and then you start speaking.
This is all information we've received in the. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
This is all information that was referred to by our committee members, so let's just get on with the vote.
Very good. Thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Saxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The officials here today have promised the documents that you asked for today, earlier. They were asked for by the committee, and I assume that the chair and the clerk will work with them to gather the documents that have been asked of them earlier today. And we do not seek to redo the work of the Auditor General in this committee. We seek to study the report of the Auditor General. And therefore, Mr. Chair, at this time, I would like to move a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion's in order. It's not debatable. Therefore, I'll ask the... Yes, I was going to ask for a recorded vote myself. Mr. Byrne has formally requested one, so I will ask the clerk to conduct a formal roll call vote on the motion to adjourn. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Saxton? Mr. Aston? Ms. Bateman? Mr. Dreeshen? Mr. Hayes? Mr. Cramp? Mr. Shipley? Madame Blanchette-Lamont? Monsieur Ravignan? Mr. Allen? No. Mr. Byrne? No.
Thank you. By order of a vote of 7-4 in the affirmative, the motion carries. Therefore, this meeting now stands adjourned, and with thanks to our guests, and we'll see you all again on Thursday.